For some reason, when I woke up this morning, I was a little nervous. Just because y'all are my friends and family. And so, I'm excited to be here. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate Pastor Zach, Pastor Ashley, and the church. It's just a great place to be. The thing I'm worried about the most is, well, everybody knows behind a good man, there's a lady somewhere, right? And if you see Betsy back there, I'll always be thankful for her. But if you ever see her doing this during service, I always look like I'm sucking lemons. And I'm not, and I don't mean to be. I sang in a group in college, and there were 10 of us on the stage, and the director always had the people look at me and go, and I was feeling it inside. I was happy. But I look like my dog died. And so please don't misjudge my facial expressions for being like I don't want to be here, because I do. It's just an honor to be here. Thank you. I think it's important I tell you just a little bit of my story so it all makes sense. I don't tell you my story because I'm proud of it. I tell you my story because I'm thankful to God that he took something that was a mess and made something good out of it. I was a pastor for a long time, Christian Missionary Alliance. Good stuff. Lots of fruit, lots of fun. Went to college where Mark and Nanette went, right? Crown College, great experience, great time there. So I was in the ministry, and then about 7.5, 8 years in, I resigned, and I went to work as a police officer in the city of Thomasville, North Carolina. My first call, my first night of work was a shootout. No lie. I was wondering what I was getting myself into. My second call, my first night, was a murder. So I kind of hit the ground running. It was never like that ever again. But that was the start of my law enforcement career. And I was there for a good long time until a divorce, right? I was, So anyhow, my wife and my 3 daughters moved to Wisconsin, where they were from, and I was driving a brand new police car, and I was crying, and I crashed it. And so I moved home to Johnstown pretty much like the next day. Real shortly thereafter, I went to work for Department of Corrections at a halfway house, and eventually became a police officer again, and I worked doing that, and worked my way up through, went to all it was fun. I love that job. I was a special agent for Drug Task Force, and eventually I got to be a chief of police in a couple small municipalities. And then 21 years ago happened, and I found myself sitting inside a county jail for 10 months. It had dawned on me when I got there that in all my years, so I grew up in a home where when the church doors were open, I was there. I mean, I was, not by choice, but I was there. Sunday morning, Sunday night, youth group, Wednesday night, Bible school, church camp, quiz team, all those things, I was there. Went to Bible college, heard hundreds and hundreds of sermons, and read lots and lots of books. But I had never heard anybody talk to me about prison ministry. If they did, I wasn't paying attention. It didn't really matter. But I found myself in a county jail, and I saw things from a completely different point of view. So when we talk to people up here later who have made mistakes, I want you to know I'm one of them, right? I'm sitting in a chair right next to them. And so the neat thing about our church is, as long as you're taking care of it with God, it's okay, right? I'm thankful for that. And I think, I just want to say that. So let me tell you about Go Reentry. I was in bed several years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and God's never spoken to me audibly, but I sat straight up in bed. And I realized that if I didn't do what God was calling me to do, it was never going to happen. I know I only look 30, but the clock was ticking, and I knew if I was to be obedient to what God wanted me to do, I better get out of bed and do it. And so in 2020, Go Reentry came into existence. And so to explain it to you, maybe we should talk about the big blue letter on the screen so you understand what go means. Some of you have heard this before, and I beg for your patience because I think most here haven't. But let me tell you about go. You remember the story in John where Jesus is in the temple courts and he's teaching. Temple courts is where we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have all those social media things, we didn't have big auditoriums. We went to the temple gate to hear what was going on. So Jesus is in the temple gate and he's teaching, and while he's teaching, these Pharisees come and they bring this lady. It says that they bring this lady and they interrupt Jesus' teaching, and this is what they say. They say, "We've caught this woman in the act of adultery." Has anybody ever been caught before? That's probably not a good question. Has anybody ever done something and not been caught before? Right? She was caught. Judge Judy, guilty. She was caught. And it says in the Bible that she was forced to stand there. So I don't think she walked there on her own. I don't know if they drug her by her hair. I don't know if they put her in handcuffs. I don't know what they did. But they bring this lady and they stand her before Jesus and they say, "Jesus, we've caught this lady in the act of adultery. The law of Moses commands us to stone her. What do you say we should do?" And Jesus heard their question, but immediately he started to ignore them. And he got down on the ground and he started writing, playing in the dirt. I don't know what he was doing on the ground. I don't think it's real clear. But so he's ignored their questions and they keep asking him, "Jesus, what should we do with the lady who we caught in the act of adultery? Moses says we should stone her. What do you say we should do?" And he ignores them. While he's ignoring them, let's talk about the lady for just a second. I wonder what she looked like. These Pharisees are the kind of guys you love to hate kind of guys. These are the guys that can point their finger at you and tell you everything that's wrong with you and never look at themselves. It's the guy who has a log in his own eye but can point out the splinter in your eye. That's the guy. So these guys bring her. I wonder if they even let her put clothes on. But she's standing there humiliated in front of all these people. I wonder if she was crying. I wonder what her hair looked like. Did they have makeup 2,000 years ago? Was it running? What did she look like? Was she sobbing? She's standing there before her friends and her neighbors, caught in the act of adultery, a sex crime, right? And it's a capital crime. She's standing there, all of her baggage, all of her dirt. It's not fun having your dirty laundry put out in the clothesline, is it? But hers was there for everybody to see. I just wonder. I wonder what her posture was like. I just wonder. Finally, they keep pestering him, and Jesus finally answers them, and he says, now before he answers, put yourself in the lady's, pretend you were the lady for a minute, and listen to the answer. The question is, "Jesus, we've caught this lady in the act of adultery. The law of Moses commands us to stone her. What do you say?" My paraphrase, he says, "Go ahead." He says, "Go ahead, but the person who picks up the first stone has got to be perfect." Never thought a bad thought. Never told a little white lie. Never went 56 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour speed limit zone kind of person. Perfect. If that's you and you want to throw the first stone, pick it up and stone her to death. And we all know how the story ends. They all disappear. These Pharisees, they go away one by one until it's Jesus and the lady. And he looks at the lady and he says, "Where are those that condemn you?" And she says, "They're not here." And then Jesus, God's son, says, "Well, I'm not going to condemn you either." And here's where, do you remember what he said next? He said, "Go," big blue word up there, "go and sin no more." That's what he told her. God's son. I'm not going to condemn you. Go and sin no more. I'm giving you a second chance. I wonder where now remember, everybody knows her business. I wonder where she slept that night. I wonder where she ate. I wonder who it was that came up around her, put their arm around her shoulder and said, yeah, you screwed up, but it's going to be okay. I wonder where those things came from for her. I wonder I just wonder. I wish Jesus would have wrote another couple of verses. I wish we would know. Reentry. I wonder if she made it. If we use 2023 statistics, and we're talking about second chances and people incarcerated, if we looked at statistics today and applied them to her, she probably didn't make it. This is what I know. I know that 10 out of 10 people when they leave jail say, I'm never going back. It's a terrible place. And I could tell you all the reasons why it's terrible, but I won't. I'm not going back. The disconnect is within 3 years, about 65% are back behind bars. That's reentry. That there are so many unintended consequences associated with being incarcerated. So reentry helps people stay out. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the first part of go. Go and sin no more. There's a second side. So you're saying that's easy. That doesn't apply to me. That applies to people who've been caught, right? Go has another side of the coin, and it applies directly to us. Again, Jesus is teaching, and this expert in the law comes, and he asks Jesus, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus replies real simple. He said, well, that's easy. Love God with everything, right? Isn't that what he said? And then he said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So the expert in the law says, oh, I got him. I'm going to ask him about being my neighbor. And he says, who's my neighbor? And Jesus goes on to tell the parable of the Good Samaritan. And Marcus did a great job a couple of weeks ago. Just in case you weren't here, real quick, let's run through it. A Jewish man needs to walk down a road 6 miles. The road has a history of being violent, but he decides to go on his own. He walks down the road, and sure enough, he gets jumped. He gets mugged. He gets beaten. They take all his possessions, and the Bible says they say he's laying along the road half dead. Along comes a priest, a pastor, a reverend, a person that has a congregation or a flock. Same nationality, all kind of things in common with this man, but the priest walks down the road. He sees the man beaten, half naked, laying there, going to die, and he passes to the other side and ignores him. A Levite comes down the road, another important person, and he too does the same thing. I want to point out that the two guys that should have stopped didn't. The two guys that you would expect to stop and help the man beaten along the road, they should have stopped, but they didn't. But along comes a third guy, a Samaritan, and just to refresh your memory, Jews hated Samaritans. They weren't even human in their eyes. You want to think about race relations now? Nothing compared to the way the Jews treated the Samaritans. Nothing, not even close. But along comes the Samaritan, and he sees the Jewish guy beaten along the road. It doesn't say this in the Bible. This is just Mark's thinking right now. I want to be real clear of that. But the Samaritan had to think, if I was the one beaten alongside the road, there's no way this Jewish guy would stop and help me. He had to think that. But nonetheless, the Samaritan, it says he went to him. He went to him. He bandaged his wounds. He poured oil on him. And when you poured oil on wounds, that was a way of soothing the hurt. It says he took care of him. And then it says he put him on his donkey and he took him to the inn. And we're going to talk about the inn in a minute. But he took him to the inn, and then he did more at the inn. He told the innkeeper, here's my credit card. Whatever it takes. He didn't say that, but he took all his money out of his wallet and he gave it to the innkeeper and he said, here it is. If you use all that, I'll catch up with you and square up with you when I come back. He gave him his credit card. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to help this guy get better, I want you to do that. And so Jesus tells this story, and then he asks the expert in the law, he said, who is my neighbor? And the lawyer, the expert in the law says, well, it was a Samaritan. And then you remember what Jesus said? Go and do likewise. So the go and go reentry has two sides to the coin. For those of us that have gotten caught, and that's really all of us, isn't it? Right? But we're talking specifically now those that have been caught and their consequences are out there and we're incarcerated. It says, go and sin no more, right? Go and sin no more. But the other side of the coin applies directly to everybody, no matter if you've been caught or not. You're supposed to do exactly what the Samaritan guy did to the Jewish person. Help those people that don't have anything in common with you. The whole parable talks about loving your neighbor, right? Doing the extra, going above and beyond. So that's go reentry. Go and sin no more, and go and do likewise. And you say, well, tell me about the likewise. Tell me about the going. What's that look like? Well, again, in Matthew 25, Jesus tells us what it looks like. Again, real quickly to paraphrase, Jesus walks in a room and he puts the sheep on the right side and the goats on the left side, and they're all looking at him like, why did you put me here? Is it because I had dark hair? Is it because my eyes were blue? Why am I in this group? Why am I a sheep? Why am I a goat? They both basically asked Jesus that question, and he says, I'll tell you why. When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked, you gave me clothes. When I was a stranger, you took me in. When I was sick, you took care of me. When I was in jail, you came and visited me. And Jesus goes on to tell him, whatever you did for the least of these, you did to me, right? And then the hard reality is, to the sheep, he says, there's a place being prepared for you in heaven. And to the goats, he says, I'm damning you to an eternal fire. Just check your spirit today. What am I doing with the hungry part and the thirsty part and the clothes part and the shelter part and taking care of the sick and going to and where would I have been that day? Right? So go reentry, what we do is so simple. But nobody else seems to be doing it in the criminal justice system, so we do it.